Hare Krishna, dear Vaishnavis, please accept my humble obeisances, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, and welcome to this very special conversation brought to you by the ISKCON Vaishnavi Ministry, pardon me. My name is Namsa, and I'm joined by a very special guest today, Her Grace, Mother Vrajlila. So, Mother Vrajlila, I'll just read a short bio from her, has been around for 45 years. She's been a devotee for 45 years plus. She is a chaplain with Karuna Care. She does grief support and she's a certified grief educator. She's a facilitator of the wisdom of the sages, as well as a facilitator on the Heart to Heart Vaishnavi Sangha, which is an initiative that is run by Inter IFAST and RUSA in South Africa. Today, we've been invited by the Vaishnavi Ministry to speak on strategies for positive interactions, power of nonviolent communication. So this is in line with the 16 Days of Activism for Safer Family campaign that will be running throughout the month of November and December. So that's what we're bringing to you today. And I hope that you enjoy it. For full disclosure, we did do a bio and an intro recorded on the day we'd recorded this particular program. But due to technical difficulties, that bio was a mess. And so we had to record a secondary bio. And this is what we're bringing to you today. But before we get the show on the road, I'd also like to invite Srila Prabhupada into the room. So, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale, Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namini, Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharini, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashadade Shadarini, Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram Hare Hare. Vanchakalpaturubhyascha kripa sindhuva evacha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo namo namaha. So thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy this very special broadcast and with this very important conversations about how we can cultivate safer communities within our ISKCON and the border community at large. Hare Krishna. Okay, so Hare Krishna, dear Vaishnav. Hare Krishna to everyone who has joined us. Today we are here with the Vaishnavi Ministry initiative of 16 Days of Activism for Safer Families. We were invited by one of the Vaishnavi Ministry's activists, Karuna Shakti, and I'm here with Mother Vrajlila of Inter IFAS. She's no stranger to any of the ISKCON going-ons and happenings. But before we start, I'd like to read out Srila Prabhupada's Pranam mantras, and then we can get the show on the road. Namo Om. Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale, Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine, Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharini, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashada Deshadarani, Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram Hare Hare, Vanchakalpaturubhyascha kripa sindhuva evacha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo namo namaha. Alrighty, thank you so much. Would you like to read out your Guru's Pranam mantras, Mother Vrajlila, before we get
Yes, of course. Sure. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Tirtha Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Krishna Padaya Prabhupada Shitatmane Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Bhakti Tirtha Iti Namine. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Ashtya Deshatarine. Hari 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 Bol.
Hari Bol. Thank you so much for that. So, Mother Vrajlila's bio reads as follows. We're going to do just a short introduction because, like I said, she's no stranger to the happenings of the Vaishnavi Ministry, and she was here last year, of course. So, she is one of the Karuna Care chaplains, She does a lot of work with Karuna Care, including grief support. She's a certified grief support educator and a grief educator, a facilitator on the wisdom of the sages, as well as the Heart to Heart Vaishnavi Sangha, which is a joint initiative between Inter IFAST and WUSA here in South Africa. And she's also been a devotee for 45 years plus. So we have a world of wisdom, a well of wisdom, as we'd say here in South Africa, with us. Thank you so much, Mother Vaishleila, for honoring this invitation and for being here today. I know we've taken a long time to try and organize this. It's been about like 3 months, but we're finally here. And I'm really excited. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this service. Such a beautiful service. We want to thank Karuna, Karuna Shakti, and also Radha Dasi for staying, just being so consistent and so devotionally involved in the Vaishnavi ministry. Haribol, thank you so much.
Thank you to Karuna Shakti and the Vaishnavi ministry for inviting us to this program and for allowing us to be here. So I'll just read a little bit about what this initiative is about from Karuna Shakti, what she's given us, and then we'll get in the show on the road in terms of the questions that we have and the conversation we're trying to start about safer communities, particularly with the topic of nonviolent communication. So the ISKCON Vaishnavi Ministry is excited to announce that it will be hosting the annual 16 Days of Activism for Safer Communities campaign. Srila Prabhupada had 7 purposes for ISKCON, and it was to bring members of society together with each other nearer to Krishna, and thus to develop an idea within the members of humility at large and of humanity at large, pardon me. And for each soul as part and parcel of the Supreme Soul and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The third purpose was on the basis of instructions that we feel inspired to build safer, healthy, and stronger communities so we can facilitate and advance our bhakti. So with these purposes in mind, the 16 Days of Activism campaign came about, and we aim to foster solutions based on discussions to fulfill this vision of Srila Prabhupada. So our guest today, Mother Vaishleila, will be speaking on the topic, leading the topic of discussion, strategies for positive interaction, the power of nonviolent communication. So the first question, what is nonviolent communication and how does it relate to austerity of speech within our communities?
Well, thank you so much once again. I'm just grateful to be back. Like you said, Namsa, last year was just so wonderful. It was such a wonderful array of different presentations, and I'm just grateful to be a part of it. So nonviolent communication is based on the principle of ahimsa. So it's based on the principle of nonviolence, based on understanding more about compassion. And specifically in the secular world, there's a lot of focus on empathy. So nonviolent communication in itself is a communication style, if you will, or maybe a communication modality of how to speak in a way where we communicate with empathy, where the connection with people is most important, and the way that we speak, how we speak is important. You mentioned about austerity of speech, and I believe that's the verse from the Bhagavad Gita, that verse Krishna speaks to Arjuna. And if I can read that verse, he says to Arjuna, austerity of the body consists in the worship of the Supreme Lord, the Brahmanas, the spiritual master, and the superiors like father and mother, and in cleanliness, simplicity, celibacy, and nonviolence. And then he goes on to say in the next verse, austerity of speech consists in speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and not agitating to others, and also in regularly reciting Vedic scriptures. It's interesting how in many of our different scriptures, this austerity of speech is so very important. For example, in the Nectar of Instruction, the first instructions that's given to us by Rupa Goswami, one of the first principles is on speech, how to speak, to others, uh, how to connect with others by the way that we speak. So this principle of speaking is very important to the Vaishnavas, and not just that it's studied, not just that we can understand it through the modality of nonviolent communication. Certainly, we can understand it through our acharyas and through the wisdom that's given down to us in our different scriptures. Yeah. So that's pretty much, I mean, there's so much to nonviolent communication, just in terms of how Marshall Rosenberg, that was the founder of it, in what we usually refer to nonviolent communication as NVC. Um, and his purpose, I remember once I did an intensive with him in New Mexico, and I asked him what was the goal of nonviolent communication from his vision. And he told me, he said, ultimately, I would like people to connect with the divine. And I was like, oh, that's quite interesting, because he had devised a system. He's a psychologist, and he had devised a system in order to teach people how to communicate with each other, because he saw that that was really this methodology of communication. It was definitely he could understand from a psychological point of view that many people in the world today, so many of the conflicts and the violence that we have is caused because people simply are not able to communicate in terms of connection with each other. So Marshall, in his wisdom, he gave this nonviolent communication, NVC. At the same time, he clearly understood that he wanted that people would have some divine understanding about nonviolent communication, that it would help people to understand their own divinity. And that's what nonviolent communication does, because it focuses on these different components. And if a person is able to practice these components in their speaking, then that will definitely assist in connecting with the other person. So the first component is observation. We observe situations, which is so very important. We identify our feelings. What are our feelings? We recently, in Karuna Care, myself and another devotee, her name is Leela, we partnered together to teach a course called Name Your Feelings, Tame Your Mind. Reason for that is in Rambaru's wisdom, in her vision, she of presenting Karuna Care to ISKCON, she understood that communication, uh, a, a lot of the foundation of communicating has to do with people knowing their feelings. So how to name our feelings, that was her vision, name your feelings. And so that is also part of nonviolent communication, is identifying our feelings, identifying our needs. Generally in nonviolent communication, our feelings, they're pointing to our needs, and then our needs, after we understand our needs, then we can make different requests, to different kinds of requests. Um, and if we can understand those components and apply those components in our lives when we're speaking, then it will help us to bond and to develop deeper relationships with another person. So I think in a nutshell, that's a bit about nonviolent communication.
Oh, that was a lot. No, like amazing. It's interesting how the circular world is trying to connect the different pieces of how we can manage our lives right back to the divine. And it's given so simply by Krishna and the Bhagavad Gita, communicated well by Srila Prabhupada in his probods. And yet we're still struggling, not just as humanity and society, but as devotees as well. What do you think are some of the common barriers that affect the communication um, within our communities that affect us not to be nonviolent communicators?
Yeah, that's an important question, and I believe the answer can be very layered because firstly, it's important to understand that we are imperfect by nature. So someone certainly needs to understand humanity. Um, and to understand humanity means that we accept that we're not perfect and that we make mistakes and that we do things and say things oftentimes that might not be nourishing or helpful for another person. And so to be able to have the grace to understand and accept, okay, I am not perfect. The other person is not perfect. And we're all endeavoring and trying, to become aware. Even we say, well, we are practicing bhakti, which means love of the Lord, love of Krishna, being awakened to that love of the Supreme. However, before we can awaken to the Supreme, it's really important to be awakened to humanity. And and so when that's not there, when we minimize the importance of humanity, then of course many different aspects of what it takes to have a connection with a person gets lost. And the most important aspect is this aspect of communication, how we communicate with each other. So yeah, in communities, we tend to sometimes think, oh, my only purpose is to go back home, back to Godhead, which is true. It's not like that's not ultimately our goal. However, as we are endeavoring, to practice to get to that deep level of awareness or connection with the Supreme Lord, then the Lord has arranged for us to practice on each other. And so this is why it's important, to learn things like how to listen to another person. That's something that sometimes it's difficult because we're trained in our society to always want to be the one that looks smart and look good and the one that knows the answers. And so we always want to think, we're always overthinking and trying to think ahead. And so when somebody's speaking, we already formulated some thoughts in our consciousness to respond, and we don't take the time to pause, be still, and listen to what another person, and listen not just with the ear. That's important. We listen with the ear, however, listening with the heart. That's what nonviolent communication helps a person to really try to connect more from the heart. So we listen with the heart, where when we listen with the heart, we can become mindful of the other person. We can pay attention. We can train ourselves. We can train our listening propensity to not be judgmental, because it is a training, because we've been so conditioned to think in a way where we're critical and we're judgmental, and that's just normal, and it's just so accepted in the world. And so by us training this awareness, by us having this awareness and training ourselves with the awareness that it is important to be mindful of what the other person is saying, be thoughtful, be present with them, and to also, listen without interrupting and without formulating our own perceptions, and just be, as much as we can, someone that is willing to really hear from the heart what's happening for the other person. And then, of course, as we're mindful, then we need the tools. We need to know how, once I'm preparing myself to be a mindful listener, an active listener, an empathic listener, then what tools can I use? Sometimes people are not aware. And oftentimes in our devotee community. We may also not be aware. I remember there was a time when I was not aware. And so to be able to ask open-ended questions when we're listening to someone from the heart, we're not trying to fix them. We're not trying to, give them any kind of advice. We're not trying to bring our perspective into their story, whatever might be going on for them. We want to listen and be able to be skillful. So open-ended questions are important. Our body language is important, being present for the person, just showing from our body by whether it's by smiling or just by our eyes or some bodily way that we can let the person know I'm here and I'm listening to you. And then we can start acknowledging the person's feelings, what might be going on for them. As we become more attentive by listening to other people, we actually can tune into what they're feeling. We actually can understand because they'll also have some body language. You start reading body language. And then once we're able to really connect with people in this way, then we learn how to be encouraging, how to speak words when the time comes for us to speak words in ways that as Prabhupada says in this verse, that are not agitating but encouraging to others. So this communication is kind of a training. And we could say, well, Krishna gave us the holy names, and we have all these scriptures, and Krishna speaks in so many different ways. How important it is for us to communicate with each other and communicate in ways that are encouraging. So yes, that's there. However, it really helps our practice when we have guidance from others, senior people or senior devotees, or in the secular world, people that study, some of these modalities and how, to utilize some of these skills, these techniques. And in the devotee community, also devotees who are well versed in the scriptures and they can break the scriptures down to us. And so that way we can digest some of the same things that are being said in the scriptures. But we need guidance in either one of these situations, whether we're approaching it from a secular point of view or from what Krishna has already given to us.
I really like
Yeah,
that.
I don't know.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I really like that point about guidance because, like you mentioned, we're not taught this in school. We're not taught this in our day-to-day interactions. It's something that you said is a practice. We have to really be committed to wanting to be nonviolent communicators. And you spoke about the word encouragement. And I think that's the follow-up question, a perfect segue into the next question. How can we encourage open and honest communication between individuals?
Well, firstly, it's important to have an open mind, like
Yeah.
as I was saying before, if we don't come to people with our preconceived ideas, our preconceived perception of how we think another person should be speaking or how another person, I use that word should because oftentimes we think like that. They should, know this. Why don't they know this? Or they should speak like this, or they should be able to understand. But oftentimes, people don't. And so that's where the empathy and the compassion comes. It's just like practicing bhakti. We're always evolving as we practice, as we chant, as we hear. We're always, as we take guidance, we're always, evolving in our heart connection. So similarly, as we open up our minds to hear others, to truly hear others, as I was saying earlier, hearing from the heart, to be able to connect with other people's feelings, what they're feeling, and to be able to understand what might they need that perhaps we may be able to help or may not be able to help. Um, yeah, what is it? What's the need? Today, in these days, we're in the world, and in the world, people tend to think the more harshly I speak to someone, the more they're going to listen to me, or the more they're going to, do what I say, but that's not the case, actually. It may work for a short time, it may work temporarily. However, on the long term, in the long term, we want to learn how to be sweet. As Krishna is sweet, sweeter than sweet, right? A beautiful song that we sing about Krishna and Janmashtami. Krishna is sweeter, sweeter than sweet. So we want to learn how to be sweet. It's not always easy in communities, that's for sure, because like I said, there's so many different layers of our existence that we have. So as we practice, though, as we practice and as we become aware, then that practice becomes like a Velcro. It's just like stick. We stick on. It becomes like we automatically we're able to speak because it's that training has stuck with us, and so that's what we would like to encourage ourselves. Myself, I'm constantly encouraging myself and sharing that with others, making myself available. So many devotees are speaking about the importance of us connecting as a family, and it comes by our speaking, how we're hearing each other. And not to say that, our conditioned selves won't come in at times, for sure. However, and not to be Pollyanna either and say, oh, what are you saying? Is it just to be nice all the time? And there's not a time when you can, you know, say things that are important to someone that they need to get. Well, actually, in the Rupa Goswami, he's, of course, we are Rupanugas, and he's the most kind. And he teaches us that there are different ways that when we speak, there are different personalities that can speak in ways that might seem intense. And he gives the example of the spiritual master. He said the spiritual master, has that right, if you will, to sometimes speak in ways that may seem intense, because that the spiritual master may be uh, able to encourage the devotee by speaking in a way that may sound to someone else, as intense, or maybe even it may sound harsh. And so that we understand uh, can be there, but even there's an addendum that not a spiritual master should not do that all the time. Not on a like a regular basis. The spiritual master is to be speaking in a harsh way. No, the spiritual master, whether the spiritual master is a woman or man, they speak in a way that may sometimes seem intense. However, it's because they have an understanding of that particular devotee and how to encourage that particular devotee. This point can be a little controversial, but it's however, it can be a little controversial. However, that's there in the scripture. That is because we don't want it to seem like, oh, if my spiritual masters are nice to me all the time, that means, he doesn't want to connect with me. No, no. Sometimes the spiritual master needs to be direct, straightforward, um, focused, may say something that might not land well for the immature disciple. However, yeah, that the purpose is to help that soul to let go of something that they may be holding on to, that the spiritual master knows if they speak a little more intensely, then the disciple might get a little like awake, more awake. Yeah, like sometimes parents with parents, you see the father and mother, right? They may speak a little more intensely, but the child knows the parent loved them. Of course, this is specific. If it's a dysfunctional relationship, then yes, no, yes, we're not speaking about dysfunctional relationships. We're speaking about loving relationships. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a brilliant point about those loving relationships. And I like how you touched on the fact that in today's society, the stronger your speech is, the more harsh your speech is. It seems like the stronger you are. But actually, we know from a psychological perspective that sometimes there's a lot of deep woundedness that happens on the inside of someone who has that kind of energy that they're carrying around with them, that they may not be actually be heard or felt like they're heard. And so they walk around with that false armor of strength in their speech. And then, it's something that just like is a knock-on effect from one person to the next person. And before you know it, a whole society of just angry people who were just, yelling at each other. And I've seen this, happen quite a bit. And I think, I don't know, it's the energy of high school sometimes. When I think about high school, I remember it just being one of those, like a competition of who can be more mean. It was subtle, like no one had to say that, oh, we're just being mean. But it just felt like the meaner the person was, the more popular they were, the more they got their way. But you could tell there was a deep sadness there. And only after that do you realize that, oh, some of these people are dealing with a lot. And that goes for anything. Like work environments are exactly the same. I know I've been in some of those situations where you're in an environment where everyone is just really hardcore and their hearts are very cold. And once you've left that environment and tried to connect with those people, you realize just how much they were hurting. And so it's a brilliant point that you've brought up, that uh, it's good to be honest and to connect and to open up, because the kindness that we're communicating with each other, when we're kind to each other in our communication, it goes far deeper, and we can actually get a lot more done than when we have this harshness. And I guess to the next point, which is what are the strategies to de-escalate conflict or to prevent such conflict when it arises?
Yeah, it's important for us to understand firstly ourselves. And I have a story that happened not too long ago with me. Um, there was a person, a devotee male, and he was quite intense in his speaking. Quite, I don't know, just the body language was intense. Even before you get to the speaking, you see this person and it's like, oh, I think I need to go the other way, because they're just so intense looking, and and then when they speak, if they speak, it's very cut and just not any way nourishing or connecting, just really harsh. And I remember thinking about that, seeing that and being a part of it. And I mean, being a part of it, meaning I was the recipient of that kind of behavior. And then one day, I said to him, I said, I'm really not taking you so seriously because you are a hurt little boy. And he just like looked at me. And I said, I think I maybe just said, yeah, you're a hurt young man or hurt young boy or something like that. And then I said, but I really would like to, connect with you. And I left it like that. And then, mm, yeah, later, mm, months later, he's just started opening up, and now it's fine. And so in that way, I spoke very directly, but I spoke motherly, lovingly. You're hurt, and I understand that. And as you said, Namsa, yes, that's what happens. Sometimes in our childhood, we may experience like harshness from family members, or we may experience you're a child, so don't speak. you know. So when you do get to speak, you don't even know how to speak. We don't even know how to speak, not you, but in general, people don't know how to speak. Um, and then there's the defenses, right? Because maybe we have been hurt, in our lives. And so people develop these fences around them. And then it comes out in ways that's just very unhealthy. And the first way that we can understand how unhealthy a relationship can be is how people speak to each other. And so this awareness of conflicts is also very important in our communities. It's important, I believe, for everyone to have an understanding of our conflict styles, the way we communicate. How do we deal with conflicts? For example, um, there we can either avoid conflicts, just go into our own little caves when something seems like it's going to be just too distressing. And many people do that, especially in the devoted community. I know I have done that,
I know.
just like disappear. It's like, I'm not present anymore
I
because
just
this
become
is
a
too much.
turtle. Like,
I'm gonna hide. So we avoid the conflict. Or yeah, we sometimes can be very aggressive ourselves, right? We
mhm.
can be very challenging. And I know some devotees like that, if they think you coming to them with some situation that's going to be conflictual, um, definitely they will be aggressive, they will respond and yeah, very confrontational. Their personalities like that. And then their personalities that really understand that in order to de-escalate some situation, there needs to be dialogue. There needs to be conversation. And if we don't have some tools to have conversation, then it will be difficult to de-escalate, any kind of conflictual situation. So again, that principle or that skill that's important is to be able to listen and to listen compassionately, listen with empathy, listen in a way where we value the other person, what they're saying, listen in a way that we really want to hear what the person's feeling and what they're needing. Listening is such an important skill, it's such an important tool for everyone anywhere to be able to access at any time, this listening skill. People, we tend to think we know how to listen, but as I said, oftentimes we are thinking we're listening, but the noise is going on. So how to stop the noise within ourselves to be able to really hear the other person? That requires the heart. We also need to know this tool of reflecting back if we want to listen, if we want to de-escalate a problem. We need to hear so that we can reflect back to the person what they said. Because a lot of times we have in our own minds, the way that we are hearing what somebody is saying. And oftentimes we make the story about us as opposed to like what's going on for the other person. So this reflecting skill helps us to be able to repeat back to the other person, is this what you, so I'm hearing you say whatever we thought they said. And sometimes they'll say, no, that's not what I said. That's just not what I meant. That's not what I said. And so this reflecting skill is so important. We spoke about the importance of empathy. It's important that we learn how to empathize, walk in another person's shoe, understand what might be going on for them, what they might be feeling, to be calm within ourselves, which means self-awareness is important. I'm sorry, I keep looking out my window. I saw a car. Okay. Self-awareness is important. That's very important too for us to have, because sometimes we might, have we might have so many different, not sometimes, many times, so many lackings within ourselves. We don't feel worthy. We don't think we're worthy, or we have low self-esteem, or so many of all that's there from, our journey in the world, from journeying from a child, because we've been taught so many things just in a conditioned way. It's important to have some humor, to not take ourselves so seriously. you know, because if we take ourselves too serious and we think, oh, but they need to understand how this is affecting me. And there are some things, where humor is not appropriate, of course, because people can sometimes really cross the line with things that can be very painful, extremely painful. So perhaps, we need to know when to apply humor, but it's important within our own self to be able to have that sense that we can be humorous with ourselves, like not take ourselves so seriously. We need to offer choices to people when we want to de-escalate a situation. Offer them some choices like, well, okay, I may see it like this, but however, how are you seeing the situation, or what, are there some different choices to be made in this situation? Um,
Mm.
yeah, and I think most importantly in conflicts is to, as my spiritual master says, is to be able to, I say, find common grounds, find common ground with the person. My spiritual master says, walk in the other person's shoe. Try to understand sincerely what's going on for the other person. Um, and then know our limits. I mean, sometimes we may not be able to de-escalate a situation right then. So we may need to have some boundaries, maybe keep ourselves separate for a little bit. However, not with resentments. That's important. I was doing a workshop last night with some devotees on forgiveness. And that's one of the most difficult anartha in one sense that we carry with us is this resentments for other people, for other devotees. So if we have resentments, then we need to learn the science of forgiveness, and perhaps we may need to embrace the resentments and just kind of work with that in the beginning, to try to let it become lighter within ourselves until we can get into that space of maybe offering some forgiveness to those persons, or first maybe to ourselves, because forgiveness begins with us, with ourselves. So these are some ways that I have seen have worked in community, in terms of de-escalating. First, taking responsibility for what is my role in the conflict, what is my style. Like I said, my style is to just disappear, and it's not. It can be healthy for a short period of time, but for a long period of time, no, it's not healthy. It's not healthy, because we do need to come to that place where we can dialogue with the other person. That's very key, very important. Or dialogue about the situation. If it's a situation, we need to. We're human beings that need to connect. So dialoguing is really important for connection. Hope that's answers that question.
You definitely have. And you've answered like the three following questions as well, which is amazing. I like how you spoke about listening, which is the next question, and you answered it so beautifully. A lot of the time, we think we know how to listen. I know. I thought when you first introduced this to us, yourself and Lila, with the Heart to Heart Vaishnavi Sangha here in South Africa, you first did a workshop on listening, active listening, and I thought, oh, what is this? I know how to listen. What are we hearing here? I was so humbled by
Yeah,
how little I knew about listening, and how much of my own internal thoughts are going on as I'm hearing someone else speak. Um, how much of my own world is reflecting in what they're sharing. Um, and all of that is just that play. And so I'm not even hearing it. And even reflecting back, I remember once we did an activity where, and it was the whole hour and a half where we were saying, someone would share and then we'd have to reflect back what they were saying. And I was terrible at that, only because I was hearing my own thoughts. And so it's such an importance. I don't think everyone else, it's not to discourage anyone who really, and the community who really want to go into nonviolent communication, but listening is such an important skill that if you're not taught, you might think you know, but you don't know how very little you know about it. And it's such an important skill. So the next question Karuna wanted us to ask you was, how do we promote active listening and empathy in our interconnectedness and our interactions with others? I think you did a brilliant job with answering. You can go on, but I'll also ask a follow-up question with that because I do feel like you really went into depth with that. The follow-up question was, what are the tools and resources available for individuals to promote their communication skills?
Um, yeah, that first question, I don't think I've mentioned this as much as I did not share this important aspect of empathy, which is first to have empathy for ourselves,
Mm,
to recognize and to accept that we are imperfect beings and we are endeavoring and crying out and trying our best to understand what it means from those perfect beings to the qualities that's needed to become perfect. We're crying out for grace. We're begging for grace and mercy. That is our purpose. That is our goal. We want to learn how to love, and we want to learn how to ultimately love the Lord. And the Lord has, as I said earlier, our playground is with other human beings, whether we like it or not. That's just what we have. And that's our practice in this playground. And in the eyes of the Lord, the eyes of Krishna, we're all like children. And so this empathy has to start first with ourselves. We chose to be in this playground. It's not a nice playground. Most people just want to fight in the playground. And we're learning in this playground how to love. So here, if we're not having empathy for ourselves, for making the choices that we've made in our lives, then it is going to be very difficult to develop empathy for others because we are angry sometimes with ourselves. We're frustrated and annoyed and disappointed and all of the different emotions that we often project that other people do to us. Many times we feel those things about ourselves, and we're not so tuned into that, and we're oftentimes not able to express that. It's much easier to express it about other people. And so, yeah, first take inventory. Always take inventory, I've learned. And a lot of the inventory I take is to really revisit um, critical moments in my life, critical times in my life, where I have maybe had some defining moments that have stayed with me. For example, critical times could be, like I remember when I was 8 years old, my parents got separated. And I remember that so clearly. And that was definitely a time that defined me in a certain way. And so those that I will, whatever happened during that period in my life will define some of the ways that I might behave. And so those things I need to be very aware of. So taking inventory of myself and having empathy for the mistakes that I may have made, certainly as a teenager, certainly as a young adult growing up. And then once we get back to knowledge, back to wisdom, there are many things that we could even be guilty or ashamed of. How to have empathy for those things, remembering that remembering the humanity within ourselves and remembering, that we're imperfect, but we're loved. We're so loved. And so by that love, we can understand how to start becoming more loving with ourselves. As we develop that kind, because we look at empathy and we look at compassion, they're all like a part of Krishna's love, right? That's how Krishna is so compassionate with us, right? That's the Lord's mercy on us. So if once we start developing those qualities within ourselves, really developing them, they're always there, Um, however, we may not be connected with them. And so once we start connecting with them, then it becomes easier. When we connect with them within ourselves, it becomes easier to be available for others. And that's ultimately our goal, isn't it? Also, it also is to become available. We want to share our joys. And certainly once we start recognizing and realizing, oh, I'm being a compassionate being, then we want to share that with others. We want to help others to become that compassionate being also, or to remember that compassionate person that they are. Yeah.
And the next question.
I think that was the first part of your question. And then the second part of your question was sorry, I can't remember.
No, I'm really
Because
not.
that part caught my attention so
Yeah, no,
much.
and yeah, the empathy. Oh, yes. Um, Especially with ourselves. I know I'm guilty of that. And sometimes I could lash out at the people who are closest to me. Not because if they've done anything wrong. It might be so small, whatever they've done, but I know that I'm upset with myself, that I'm struggling with my own shortcomings, that I'm my biggest critic, and sometimes I'm my biggest demon. The one person who I'm really hurting is me. And so when I hear that, I this whole conversation feels like you're speaking directly to me because some of these things are things that
Well,
I'm guilty of.
I'm speaking to myself, because at different times, our inner dialogue, it's like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, the mind can be our best friend, our worst enemy. And our inner dialogue from the mind can be like the worst enemy ever.
Yeah.
so
So,
so it's really important to check in with our inner dialogue. And sometimes it's not even we have this inner dialogue that's we're taking from the environment, we're taking from other people, so it's important to be conscious of ourselves. Yeah.
to catch myself, I think that's a big thing. When I hear
Yeah.
it and it's really loud and I see it, especially when it manifests itself externally, and I'm like, ooh, it's
Yeah.
in the heart, it's me trying to
Yeah.
talk to me. And is this what I want? Then to try to redirect. And this is the follow-up question. What are some of the tools and resources available to help individuals to improve their communication skills?
Bhagavad Gita. I think if we read Bhagavad Gita, read Krishna's words to Arjuna, I mean, it's interesting how, I mean, there's so many scriptures that we have been given by the mercy of the Acharyas and Srila Prabhupada's grace. However, Bhagavad Gita, it's a book that we can find everything in it. We see the conflicts that was going on. We learn how Krishna listened. We saw how he listened in the first chapter, maybe even one and a half chapters, even the beginning of the second chapter. He listened. He listened to Arjuna, and he didn't really say anything until Arjuna asked. And then when Arjuna asked, then of course we see the teacher in him come out, and he spoke in a way that was very, very disciplined and focused. And some people might even say, but he was pretty intense, and maybe he was. And he had that right at that point. The student asked, and so he responded in a way that the student could hear. The student's heart was open, ready to hear. And yeah, so Bhagavad Gita, and then throughout the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord is sharing with Arjuna how the different qualities to develop, and to understanding how everything is working around us, how material nature works, how the modes affects us. So much in the Bhagavad Gita, and this one verse that's just so sweet, where he says austerity of speech, just to how to speak. Even he's teaching us, and he didn't say. He said, in speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, and beneficial. He didn't say for others. He said, you need to learn that. So
Mhm.
that's first for ourselves and not agitating others. So once we learn that, we won't agitate other people once we have a sense of what it means to speak truthful and pleasing and beneficial, then how can we agitate others when we're speaking, from that paradigm? And of course, Krishna says, and reciting the scriptures. So that's important. If we don't know the scriptures, if we don't have knowledge of the scriptures, it's going to be difficult because the mind is restless and fickle. And even though the intelligence is there to guide us, the mind often, goes on its own tangent. And so therefore it's important to have the words, the wisdom of the scriptures. And yeah, like I said, Rupa Goswami speaks about this in the Nectar of Instruction. Vacha Vega, Manasa Krodha Veda, Vegam, Jiva Vegam, all the different Vegams that destroy our spiritual life. So it's not just from a secular place, nonviolent communication. It's very much in everywhere. It's in our scriptures everywhere. So, and then again, if sometimes for some people, really internalizing what we read in the scriptures might not be as easy for some. And so this book from Marshall, Nonviolent Communication, it's a very simple book in the words of how it's delivered. And I recommend that book. Yeah, Nonviolent Communication. And uh, in that community, there are many different writers in the NVC community. So you can check that out, NVC, and they have a list of different books that can be very helpful for all different cultures. One of my favorite books is about diversity and how to be able to speak nonviolently in different cultures, in diverse communities. Because in some cultures, it's accepted to be harsh. In some cultures, I know I personally have lived in some cultures where everybody speaks harshly. And it's not even like for them, it's not even harsh, it's just normal. So then how do we go into a culture and, just, and perhaps be self-righteous and think, oh, look, listen to how they talk to each other. And no, we need to learn how to communicate even with people that may appear or sound, because that might be sound harsh, because that might be a part of their culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, so diversity is key.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I know some of the cultures that you speak about, and I know like a lot of colonized communities have that as their culture, and maybe it's a culture that they've adopted from what the colonial authorities may have left them with, and it's become their culture. But if as soon as they awaken to what was, then they are back into this loving, um, a culture of love, a culture of kindness and softness, gentleness. Like, we've got gentle parenting. And in those cultures, it's seen as like, wow, you're just spoiling the child, And yet they make some of the most amazing human beings once they grow up because they understand that this kindness really can defeat a lot of things in the world. And thank you for sharing also those resources about finding so many writers, including Marshall on nonviolent communication. They're available. I must say they are available online. I have seen a few of them. It is also available, some resources available on YouTube. So for those who are really eager, they are there. Those resources also there.
Also, there's a Prabhu that I was thinking, I had his book this morning, I was reading it. Krishna, I'm kind of spacing out on his name right now, but he wrote a book from a Vaishnava perspective on the mind. And he's kind of a person that bridges our philosophy with like secular world thinking. And it's just a most amazing book about how the mind, really affects just the way we speak, as how our mind might lash onto something or someone, or how the mind gets disturbed. And yeah, so there are many young writers now in our devotee community that have learned and are learning the science of bridging words. So they're able to bridge words using a secular community with, of course, a Vaishnav language, and make it a little more easier for some people to understand. So I'm sorry I don't have that book right now with me, but I can give that book a little later. As I found that one to be really, really important.
Hmm. We can ask Rona to put it in the notes at the end.
Yes, yes, I
uh,
will do that.
yeah. How can we promote empathy and understanding in communication with others? I think we've done this question.
Yeah, I think
Um,
so.
what are some of the ways?
Chaitanya Charan, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu. That's the
Okay,
devotee. He's
okay.
just such an amazing devotee, such a prolific writer, and he's so insightful, and he just gives people things to think about. And yeah, I believe that that book can really help someone to understand how the mind works. And that way we can also understand from that how conflicts and, just this need to that we often have to speak in harsh ways to others. Yeah, we can understand from his from his presenting this his reflections on the mind, which I believe is reflections from Bhagavad Gita.
Chaitanya.
Sorry, I didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for remembering that. What are some of the ways we can de-escalate conflicts and disagreements that resort to violence and aggression?
Would you be willing to say that again,
Sure.
please?
Yes, absolutely. I'll say it slower. What are some of the ways to de-escalate conflict and disagreements without resorting to violence or aggression? Similar to the question that we've asked before.
Yeah, and that's a wonderful one for the mind, for that book I was sharing. Um, because the mind is what Krishna tells Arjuna more difficult to control than the wind. And we create our reality, right? So if we have a reality that things has to end in violence, then that's what we're creating for ourselves. If we create a reality that uh, we can uh, we can face a conflict by having tools and communication skills to address the conflict, to be able to understand how to dialogue. Yeah, then that's a way of de-escalating conflicts in our communities. So, for example, if some situation is escalating in the community, then it's important. It's so important to have some devotees in the community that has uh, conflict resolution skills or mediation skills or nonviolent communication skills. The tools that are given by any of these different modalities can help so much if somebody can't hear scripture, which in many cases, many when people are in conflict to the point where it can escalate to violence, then they've lost, right? That verse from what is that verse? I think it's 262 Bhagavad Gita. From anger, lust develops, or from lust, all of these different things develop, right? Anger. Let me see if I find that verse real quick. I think that's 262, if I remember correctly. But from lust, then all of these different tendencies will develop and will escalate if we're not able to address them. So first of all, address the lust that's within ourselves. Sometimes the lust within ourselves could be just a desire for profit, adoration, and distinction. And it's very subtle. And that's a form of lust. And when we're not getting that, when we're not getting the adoration we think we need, or whatever it might be, the profit, the distinction, the acknowledgement, then that can lead us into different um, emotional states. And these different emotional states can be very disturbing, right? It can really be not only disturbing, but very distracting from our path. And so violence is never a way to settle anything. Um, let's see. I think is it 262? Yeah. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment, lust develops, and from such lust, anger arises. So, what's important in that situation is to be able to understand what kind of things might I be angry about? and reflect and introspect and go inside to find out, like, yeah, what is, when somebody is triggering me, when I think someone is triggering me, what is it in me that is getting disrupted? What's inside of me that's getting disrupted? So it could be something that I'm really holding on to, that I believe, and I believe it should be. And I use that word should because that kind of goes along with when we think a thing is supposed to be the way we want it to be. And if that gets somehow not acknowledged, what we want accepted, then that could turn into anger. And anger can turn into rage, and then rage turns into violence. So we want to kind of stop right in the beginning when we're getting triggered. This is triggering me. What is it bringing up in me? What's inside of me that this thing is, you know, just lighting up, and I can feel the anger coming. And so now I'm going to have to stop, breathe, take a breath, breathe, take a few breaths, connect with the breath. And then, as much best as we can, if we can, connect with the Lord in the heart and just say a quick prayer to the Lord. You know, yeah, something to connect us out of that space. Usually breathing will take us out of that space quickly. And then once we catch ourselves from breathing, then we can then look and see if, and from a nonviolent communication perspective, we would then understand, what am I feeling? Okay, so the anger is the feeling. I will be feeling, let's say I'm angry. Somebody said something, did something, some situation, whatever, and it's triggering anger in me. Okay, I'm angry. What is that anger? What is it that I need? What is that bringing up for me inside? Now, remember, this is dealing with our humanity. It's not for a person that's self realized. I'm not in any way giving this modality for somebody that's already aware and awake to their loving relationship with the Lord. It's for someone that's still struggling with their humanity. So, if that person then, once they're aware that they're angry, and they need to explore, like, okay, well, what is this anger bringing up for me? What's the tipping? What is it tipping? Is it something that happened when I was 5 years old, 10 years old, 15 years old, 20 years old, whatever? Was it something that, try to understand that. And that might not happen in the moment. So it might be that a person needs, when they, as soon as they feel that anger, to take time out, to stop. I remember once mm, I was speaking to this person, this male again, and I'm not bashing males. It's just my experience, that I've had. But I was speaking to this male who inadvertently, when his wife did something that he thought was not right, he said, this is how he explained it to me. He said that just that quick trigger, his reaction to the trigger is to raise his hand and slap. That's his reaction. That was his reaction. It just comes automatic. So he learned that somewhere, obviously. So the thing is, how do we address these emotions, especially emotions of anger, frustration, resentment? How do we address them? Uh, it, and understand what is our reaction tendency. How do we move? How do we transform those conditioned reaction tendencies to a more intelligent way of dealing with those emotions? Um, and Krishna tells us, this is what he tells Arjuna, throughout the Bhagavad Gita. So this is important. But however, first, it's important to really even understand when we get triggered and what emotions is bringing up for us, and identify, if we can, where that emotion is coming from. That's like half the work. And this comes from being aware of the fact that, oh, I'm angry right now. And maybe I just need to go to somebody and do what we call conscious complaining. Conscious complaining means we just like dump on the other person what's going on for us. And to have somebody that's skilled enough to listen and not try to advise us or just be loving listener, that this person, okay, they're going through something. They need to express it. And it might not be expressed in a way that maybe I think is healthy or cool or whatever, or I don't know, devotional, or that's what their need is right now, just to consciously complain and to accept that. And a lot of, when people are able to do that, then sometimes that energy can move because it's moving energies that's lodged in our bodies. The body holds everything. And yeah, triggers, they definitely ignite things that are lodged inside of us.
What I'm hearing you say is you have to be more conscious, more mindful.
Yeah.
That's really difficult. That's
Yeah.
yeah, because everything that you've mentioned really boils down to thinking it through, thinking things through. For example, in the moment when you start to feel the rage build up and you ask me to de-escalate it, I've heard someone say, this is a social psychologist say, you can't use the mind to control the mind in those situations. So you have to override those feelings. And you mentioned the breathing. So breathe, breath work overrides that.
Yeah.
It's like somatic, calming down. And then you get into, okay, what are these thoughts? What are my needs at this moment? And what is it triggering
Yes.
for me? So a lot of conscious work. Ooh, I don't like it. But
I also I I also just quickly want to balance that story I told about the male
mhm,
because it's really important, to know that anger is there for everyone, male and female. So I
mhm,
also remember once I was preaching in this country and this woman, she got so angry with this male devotee. It was a woman devotee, a female devotee, and this male devotee, she got so angry. And at that time, we were like, I guess the quote unquote authorities, whatever. And so the lady came to me, the woman, and she said to me, she said, you guys gotta talk to him. You gotta talk to him. She said, because if you don't talk to him and he doesn't change, I'm gonna put a wonderful mark in his eyes. And I was at that time, I remember I was just like, woo, I was so stunned because I just never had seen women with that kind of energy. It was really amazing to me. And I was just like, oh my God. So it's not just males, ladies too, they can everybody, I mean, people can just become victims of their anger, right? Of that
mhm.
emotion. And so it's really important to know because how we react to that, the emotions that come up within us are what's important. That's what needs to be transformed, the reaction. Okay.
Next question. How can we cultivate active listening skills and validating other people's feelings in conversations? I think this is also
Well, for,
related to, sorry, I
yeah.
just want to qualify the question. When it comes to active listening, sometimes, we're told, and you mentioned this, that we don't want to give advice. We don't want to tell people what to do. At the same time, sometimes people come to you when they're offloading, when they're consciously complaining, and they kind of like, expect you to say something in that moment, like, oh, you can do this, you can do that. And if you don't, because you're listening, they can work it out themselves, as they're doing this. It just takes time for them to get past that anger, get past those emotions, and then work to identify the feeling, identifying the need, and then making that request or trying to find that solution within themselves. So how can we validate other people's feelings when they're communicating and yet still hold space for them whilst they're going through that process and not feel like you're just sitting there waiting for them to just do this process.
Yeah, so that comes with the relationship. once we have relationships with each other where we can say to that person, I can see that this appears, and I can understand this appears to be quite disturbing what you're experiencing right now, and I'm willing to be here for you. I would like to engage in this process called conscious complaining, and that means you will say everything you have to say, use all the words you want to use, and I will be here to listen. I won't have anything to say. I'm just here to listen. And then once you're done with that, in some psychologists recommend, beating a pillow, and they recommend that there's all different ways that they encourage people to really embrace those different emotions, right? Or the things that are going on for them with those emotions. Conscious complaining is one that I use because I see that when I use that, it doesn't take a long time, before the person start realizing, what am I doing, and then they want to talk about it, and then they really want to talk about it. And then it's like, okay, you ready to dialogue about this now in a place where you're not just reacting. And often I see like, yeah, okay, now we can have a conversation, or we can have, yeah, some dialogue. And again, try not to fix the person as much as possible. Try not to give the person advice. Just try to be connected with their feelings. If a person is feeling hurt, you want to give them empathy. You want to be understanding, with them. And yeah, try to keep it as less words as possible, if that's possible. Of course, there's some cultures that just want you to fix things, and yeah, sometimes you may give some, like in some cultures, the elders, they go to the elders so that the elders can fix them, tell them this is not the way to do this, and da, 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 like that. And if that's the relationship, and that's the understanding, and that's the cultural norm, then we somehow, it's important to understand that. That's why diversity in culture is so important. I remember one time I was in this country, and I was doing a workshop, and in this workshop I did an exercise where I put people in pairs, and it was kind of secular workshop, and a secular um exercise. It was a secular workshop. It wasn't with devotees. And um but anyway, so I was a devotee, but they didn't know I was a devotee. So I had them look each other in the eyes, and they were supposed to stare each other in the eyes for, some period, like 5 minutes, which is a long time. And I remember, like, people didn't seem to want to do it. They just didn't seem to be doing it. And I was like confused. Like, they were such an supportive audience. The participants they participated in all the different exercises I had done. And I was curious, like, what's going on? And so then I just stopped the exercise because I saw that they were resistant. And then I asked, was I doing something? I asked for them to please, help me. Like, am I doing something that's not acceptable? It appeared like it wasn't acceptable. And then they told me, they said, that's not a part of our culture to look each other in the eye. It's just not cultural. I didn't know, I was like, I learned something that day. It was really interesting. And so sometimes we can try to help situations and say things, but it might not, the culture of the diversity of those persons. No, that's not the right way to say this. A person that comes from a different culture than me may have different cultural norms. And so that's important to understand when we're connect. And because ISKCON is such a diverse group of people, right? We come from all different backgrounds, all different cultures. So it's really important to have some little understanding. And that's why of cultures. And that's why for most of the very advanced devotees, they just stay with the scriptures. Because with the scriptures, you don't go in all those different places. It's like, this is what Krishna said. That's it. However, here we are. We're trying to, try to see how to connect with people in different ways. And this is the work that we do.
Beautiful work that we're doing, that you guys are doing. And I'm just like drinking it all in. We've come to the last question, and the last question says, what role can language and tone play in promoting nonviolent communication?
What role does language?
Yeah, what
Mhm.
role can language and tone play in promoting nonviolent communication?
Is that language in terms of our Krishna conscious language, or I'm not sure when they say language, is that language in terms of English language? What, you
I
know,
think maybe it's like our choice of words.
I
Um,
see.
yeah.
Well, I am only speaking from an English perspective, speaking
Oh,
English.
yeah.
So I think the language of the heart is most important, because then that language of the heart is it's transcends all the languages in the world. Now how do we learn the language of the heart? And so that's ultimately our relationship with the Lord, right? To the degree we are connected with the Lord in the heart, the Lord will give us the language to speak, to anyone. Sometimes we can speak to someone with just the eyes. We don't have to speak using words. Words are important in some situations, but not in all situations. I mean, I have had the best communication with people where it's not been with words in some instances. Like a mom can just look at a child with the eyes and the child knows, like don't do that. Or oh yeah, my mom is happy or pleased or whatever. Just yeah, doesn't always require words. However, if we have to use words, then use words that Krishna says that are beneficial, that can benefit another person. Right now, that sometimes in our conditioned state, it's hard because words we might think might be beneficial might not be for the other person. So some things are just trial and error, and learning by our mistakes and being humble to accept that we make mistakes. To be humble, that language is very important. Humility. That's a major part. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he explains to us that as soon as we accept our fallacies, the things that are wrong with us, and just look for shelter from the Lord, just wholeheartedly look for shelter, then the Lord will the Lord will actually speak through us, because that's Vaishnava humility. So if we're humble, and not false humility, not show model humility, not humility to just please other people, but genuine humility from the heart, um, the kind of humility that we learn from, like I said, like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, not lack of self-esteem, not feeling, not things of not being worthy and all the things we talk about, but genuine humility that, you know, anything that we do, whatever we do, whatever we say in relationship to Krishna, say with wanting to ultimately connect with Krishna. So see the spirit soul in each person to the best of our ability, and speak to that spirit soul as Krishna is speaking to us every day. So I do believe that we do need more of the language of the heart. I
Thank you.
hope that's cool.
That was beautiful. Karuna did want us to speak about humility and what actual humility was, and I think you touched on that. And I think I wanna steal a minute or two to ask about that. What is actual humility, especially because you spoke now a little bit about that false humility, that one that almost promotes this self deprivation, like, oh, I'm not so good, or all of these things that are very unkind to ourselves and can be counter um to to growth and to really understanding Krishna and how he sees us and how he wants us to see ourselves. Also, with regards to the culture of wanting to be, like to peacock, like I'm the best, and yet at the same time, internally, you don't feel like you're that. And so you're lashing out, and it's contradicting what it is you're trying to project. But the internal world is something completely different. I also want to have I want to be robust in my communication. Like, I want to say what I say and mean it, be kind, but I don't want it to be like I'm being nonviolent, and therefore, I can let anyone say and do whatever they want and quote unquote walk all over me. Which is, I don't even think that that's a thing. I think that's a very layered thing. We can sit here and unpack the whole walk all over a person. But yes, for lack of a better word, I think that's the kind of, someone might be watching this and be like, well, this is a bit woo, and it might be too much in the clouds. How do we make it more tangible? That was a lot. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a nice question for us to end on. I mean, of course, humility is really important for our spiritual progress. And we always, we have that famous shloka, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, more humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, right? Be ready to offer all respects to others. So we have guidelines, we have a guidepost, so to speak. At the same time, the reality is that we are very conditioned souls, at least I am. And I am learning. I hear this wonderful principle. I'm not always able to live this principle in my life. No, it's a practice. It's definitely a practice, and it's prayer in my practice. Um, and as Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, to really accept just all of our anarthas. I have to accept that, I have so many anarthas, and I can only learn about humility from these great devotees. At the same time, if I see myself in relationship to how Krishna sees me, then I'm just the most, glorious being on this planet. Because, I mean, Krishna has given us everything. I mean, even to the point where he gave us Srila Prabhupada. And, Srila Prabhupada, being so kind, has given us our respective spiritual teachers. So, that's a lot to be really proud about, to really be a peacock about. It's like, yeah, it's not ordinary to have this. Um, but in terms of material life and the baggage I might still carry from material life, I my position is to be a beggar and to pray to the Lord to assist with that baggage, to let me lighten the load, to let me let go of the load. And that's only by mercy, only mercy. So the humility is in terms of seeing ourselves though in the street is to know that we're like having this opportunity for mercy to lighten our load or let go of our load. At the same time, once we let go of that load, we see the beautiful, spiritual peacocks that we are, or whatever, whatever we may be spiritually. Um, and so it's kind of, I don't, yeah, I don't think humility, my spiritual master says, is to think less of ourselves and to think more of others, right? That's what he says. Think less of ourselves, which means that less of ourselves in terms of all the baggage we carry, and just think of what Krishna has given us and giving that to others more, and just giving to others the mercy we receive. So if I can engender any humility, is to be able to be grateful to my spiritual master and grateful to Srila Prabhupada for just letting me understand the three modes of material nature. Because that for me is like, wow, Krishna, thank you so, so, so much for these amazing, amazing souls. So I would like to end there.
Oh, that was beautiful. Thank you for this. In the closing words of the Vaishnavi ministry, um, we hope that this raises awareness and for devotees and amongst devotees, and inspires them to cultivate healthier environments in their local communities. So thank you so much, Madhava Sheila. I really appreciate it. And thank you to
Thank you,
Vaishnavi
Devi.
Thank you.
You're the best.
You are amazing. Thank you. Thank you to Karuna, the Vaishnavi Ministry, and all of those who are involved in this process. Thank you. Thank you.
I personally want to thank Radha Dasi, who, you know, she is an amazing, amazing, amazing soul that has given her life to assisting the Vaishnavis ever since I've known her. I thank her for inspiring other Vaishnavis to carry on the mission. Thank you, Radha.
Thank you, Radha.
Hari
Haribo. Hare Krishna. I think we can end it there. Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhu
Eva Cha, Patita Nam,
Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.
Oh Namaha.
Thank you.
Haribo.
Haribo.
You'll turn off the recording.
Doing that.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama.